Want to be a topper in MBA entrance exams? Join BYJU'S Exam Prep, CAT and MBA YouTube channel and watch serial 99 percentilers teaching you the tips and tricks.
Good noon, all of you. Hi, Kashish. How are you? Good noon, Varun. Hello, Chaya. Good noon, Tanvi. Hi, Sameer. Happy noon. Same here. Hello, Dharmi. Sorry. Poonam, Shaina, Sanil. Good noon, Mamta. Good noon, Varun. I'm well. I hope the same for you. Hello, Bhargavi. Hi Radhika, Prashant, Prateek. So finally a critical reasoning session. Yes, we've already had one basics of critical reasoning session. Okay, so it was target critical reasoning. I think that was the name, right? And there I talked to you about all the basic questions of critical reasoning. Anybody remember that? Hello Ritesh. Hi Prateek. Hi Ritik, Shubham. Hello Payal. Good noon. Good noon Mohan. Sankaran. Yes, tell me. How many of you? Yes, okay. So Kashish remembers. Now, others, did you attend that session? If you haven't, then I suggest that you please watch that session. Why? Because that has the basic questions, right? We build the base there, the foundation there, right? So we identify what an argument is, how to look at an argument, how to evaluate it, what are the parts of an argument. All of that we do in that basic session. Today we have relatively more advanced questions. Basically, instead of calling them advanced questions, I would say today we have different question types, okay, than what we did earlier. Hello, hi Bhavesh, hi Priya, hi, okay. Welcome Sanil. See, I think the sessions are relevant only because we cater to what you ask, right? Otherwise, there's no point in my lecturing about something when you don't even require to be lectured on that, right? Hello Sunny, hi. Okay, so if I quickly recap things for you, then in that previous session, we talked about these question types, right? We talked about what an argument is, what are the various parts of an argument, right? Then we learned how to conclude something or infer something, right, from a given set of premises. What are premises? Premises. So in an argument, basically what an argument is your viewpoint that is formed on the basis of one or more reasons, right? So in logic, this viewpoint of yours is called the conclusion, and the reasons on the basis of which this conclusion has been formed, these are called your premises, these reasons, right? So when a given set of premises is given to you, how to conclude something from them, how to infer something from an argument, that is what we learned there, right? This is a very basic question type. Then what exactly are the assumptions that are implicit in an argument? Because we learned that in an argument, while these two parts of an argument are visible, there is one part of an argument that is invisible. There is one part of an argument that is invisible. This invisible part is assumptions of the arguer. The assumptions of the arguer. So how to identify those assumptions? That is also a question type that you can be asked. Then if an argument is given to you, how to further make it stronger, okay? Or if let's say there is an argument that you see, how to attack it in a logical way. These are the four question types that form the very basis of your critical reasoning questions, right? Now, apart from this, yes, we do have a session on parajumbles. Somebody is asking this in the chat box. We do have it, I think, uh, next week. Yes, next week itself we have a session on parajumbles, right? So there I have already talked to you about the unique MAH CET type parajumble, right? We have seen it in, I think, 3 sessions now. I have covered one such question type with you, wherein you have vocabulary questions, grammar questions based on parajumbles, as well as of course sequencing the parajumble, right? So in the coming session I will talk to you about some other types of parajumbles, more about the kind that were asked last year, right? So don't worry, we do have a session. Okay, Today, what is our agenda for today? Today we are going to talk about these question types. Okay, logical flaw or a flaw in the reasoning, logical completion of an argument, the method of reasoning used in an argument, what is the main point of the argument. So this is an easier question type because here you just have to give the crux of the argument. That's it. If you find some apparent contradiction or discrepancy in an argument, then how to resolve it, and how to find arguments that follow a structure very similar to our given argument. Okay, so similar arguments. This is all we are going to see today. Now, all right, all right. Between inference and conclusion, you need not get confused, Varsha, because for your examination purposes, you have to apply the very same principles for both the question types. Okay, if I ask you, so there are some question stems that can be used for asking these two question types. What can be inferred from the above argument? What can be concluded from the given information? Right? Then what can be, if the statements given above or if the argument given above is true, which of the following is also true, right? Which of the following logically follows from the given information? So basically, whenever I tell you what logically follows, if the given information is true, what else is true, what from the given options is true, if I ask you to infer or conclude something, you have to apply the exact same principles. You have to derive something from the given information within the scope of the given information. We don't have to stray away, we don't have to go out, we don't have to broaden it, we don't have to give something that is incomplete, right? So you really don't need to get confused between the two because they apply the exact same principles, right? Okay. All right. Cause effect. While I'll address this, okay? Because right now, if I address this, we'll launch into a detailed discussion that will not be related to critical reasoning. I will address this, okay? But later on. Okay. Now, let's have a look. Let's have a look at our first question, okay? So, inference questions, why don't you once look at this? Why don't you once have a look at this session that I was talking to you about, target critical reasoning? If you still have confusion, then last year I specifically took a session that was based on inference and conclusions only. I think it was called critical reasoning, inference, conclusion. That was the name for MAH CET. So have a look at that. I think that will help you in how to pick up, what all to pick up from the given information and what all not to pick up. Because I think the problem with students is that they tend to pick up a lot more than what is needed. Basically, we apply our external knowledge, we give our own, apply our own opinions, and then mark the answer, which is not something that is required, that is needed. Okay, so have a look at those two sessions, and if you still have confusion, then we can discuss this, right? So let's have a look at the logical flaw question, right? This is a popular previous year question. Now, some information is given to you here, right? So this is what we call the stimulus. In the world of critical reasoning, this is called the stimulus. This is your question stem. I have told you earlier as well, I'll repeat it today. Please read the question stem first because that tells you what you have to do. So then you read the stimulus with that focus. For example, which of the following would reveal most clearly the absurdity of the conclusion drawn above? That means that this conclusion that has been drawn above, the author feels that it is absurd. There is some flaw. There is some flaw in this conclusion, right? You have to basically see how is this conclusion flawed. You have to identify how is this conclusion flawed, how from the given premises, from this given premise, I am unable to reach this conclusion. This conclusion cannot probably be drawn, right? So read this, okay? Then look at your options and eliminate, okay? And when you read this, read it with the focus of understanding it and questioning it, because this is a question on identifying the flaw. So you have every right to question the stimulus, right? So read it, read the options, and then tell me what the answer should be, right? Meanwhile, I'll read your messages. Paradox analogy, will come to it, Varun, don't worry. Okay. All right. Okay. B, A, others. Okay. All right, all right. So I'm getting quite a few B's here. Praful says C. Okay. A, B, C. What about others? D. All right. So very short stimulus. I have even identified the premise and the conclusion for you. So we are saying 3,75,000 civilians died and 4,08,000 members of the armed forces died. So on the basis of this, it can be said that it was not much more dangerous to be an armed person, to be a person in the armed forces, than it was to be a civilian. But again, the moment you read this stimulus, something seems off here, right? Because uh, look at the number of the number of people in the armed forces, the number of soldiers versus the number of civilians. Of course, the total number of civilians is much, much higher. So if out of, let's say, 10 lakh civilians, in fact, let's make it 1 crore civilians, right? If, let's say, out of 1 crore, 3,75,000 perished, 3,75,000 died, that's a relatively small percentage. Whereas if, let's say, out of 10 lakh soldiers that are there in the US armed forces that were there at that time, 4 lakh 8,000 perished. That means 40.8%, right? So that's a very high percentage. So actually we should have looked at it as a percentage, right? We have to identify, Ash, we had to identify how this argument was a flawed argument. There was some flaw in the argument. The conclusion was flawed. So you have to identify what is that flaw. 5 options are given to you, right? So I have got many B's here, some A's here, right? And of course, one of C's and D's. So if you say A, counting deaths among members of the armed forces who served in the United States, in addition to deaths among members of the armed forces serving overseas, how will this help me? Yes. So we are talking about members of the United States Armed Forces. That is what the discussion is about, right? So members of the armed forces who served in the United States, counting their deaths makes sense. But why do I count deaths among the members of armed forces serving overseas? Yes. Why do I need to count their deaths? No, I am just concerned about members who served in the United States only, of this country only, not of other countries. That is not going to help me because the conclusion has been drawn on the basis of these two statistics, and both are about the United States, right? So there's no point in taking data from overseas. Can be eliminated easily, don't you think? Okay, now look at B. Expressing the difference between the number of deaths among civilians and members of the armed forces as a percentage of the total number of deaths. Okay. Now, if you say B, total number of deaths. So, this total number of deaths would include civilian deaths also, plus let's call them soldiers deaths also, right? So let's say this, for the sake of simplicity, or let's say I am assuming that there were 10 lakh soldiers, right? 10 lakh soldiers and 20 lakh civilians. Okay, this is the double, 20 lakh civilians, right? So now, expressing the difference between the number of deaths among civilians and members of the armed forces. First of all, you express it as a difference. So that's 25 plus 8, 33,000. Okay. 33,000 divided by 30 lakhs. How is this figure going to help you in any way? Tell me. Uh, Expressing the difference between the number of deaths among the civilians and members of the armed forces as a percentage of the total number of deaths. So you just have to now multiply it by 100 to make it a percentage. This figure is not helping me at all again. Okay, so even B is erroneous. Okay, so uh, when you read the stimulus, question it in such a, when you have to identify a logical flaw, question your stimulus. Okay, the premises, civilians itne, uh, then soldiers itne, but then how many soldiers were there in total? How many civilians were there in total? This is the data that I need. This is what has not been presented to me, which is important for me to make a decision. Right. So while this question talks about total number of deaths, adding these up, finding out a difference here, expressing this as a percentage is again not going to help me. What is going to help me is this data. 3,75,000 divided by 20 lakh. Okay. And 4,08,000 divided by 10 lakhs. Okay. And then comparing the two. That is what is going to help. Okay. Now, I did get some C's and D's also. I did get, just a second. Let me just close the poll so that I can see your messages. Right. So if I look at C and D, C says separating deaths caused by accidents during service in the armed forces from deaths from deaths caused by combat injuries. So basically it's saying that for the armed forces also you separate it into two parts, those that died by accidents and those that died by combat injuries. But again, how is this going to help me? Because the question is about how dangerous or not dangerous it was. Even if, let's say, they died in accidents during service, that is also a danger, right? An occupational hazard. So even this is not going to help me, right? Let's look at D and E. D and E. So I thought that this time the first question should be a relatively challenging question. This is a popular previous year question. Comparing death rates per 1,000 members of each group rather than comparing the total number of deaths. Yes. So currently we are comparing the total number of deaths. This is flawed. We should compare them. Either I should do this. Okay, either I should simply say 4,08,000 divided by 10 lakhs and compare it with 3,75,000 by 20 lakhs. This is one way. Or rates per 1,000 members of each group. So basically, then I basically find out after dividing it, then I multiply it with 1,000. So per 1,000, kitne members? Per 1,000 jo total, basically, it's just like percentage. I hope you're getting this. Just like percentage, I am just looking at it instead of per 100, I am looking at it as per 1,000. Right? So यहाँ पे हमने 100 के बजाय 1,000 से multiply कर दिया. That's it. Do you get it? Ultimately, it is also saying the same thing that I was telling you. We are looking at them by looking at first the total number of members in each group and then comparing them. Is this clear? Is this clear? Yes. D is the answer here. In case it is not, tell me. So I did get some D's. Ananjan said D. Ananjan said D. Then others later on. Yes, Abhinav said D. Then Yash also said D. All right. Varun said D. Okay. So great that it is clear. Now let's have a look at E. Comparing deaths caused by accidents in the US to deaths caused by combat in the armed forces. So first of all, accidents in the US. How will this data help me? This is another third variable altogether. I am concerned with civilians and soldiers. Why to talk about again accidents? Right, just like here, we were talking about accidents, combat. So here also new variables have been introduced. This is not going to help anybody. Only D is something that makes sense. Okay, so Chaya, let's see. Let's say this, let's take simpler examples. Okay, so if I'm saying that 3 civilians died versus 4 soldiers died, right? So I've just simplified it. 3 civilians and 4 soldiers. So that's why they are saying that it was not more dangerous. It was not very much more dangerous to be a soldier than to be a civilian. But what if this 3 is out of 100 civilians versus this 4 is out of 10 soldiers? Yes. So there is a huge difference now. This is just 3% while this is 40%. So basically we should compare the percentages. We should compare the percentages. Now, instead of looking at it as per 100, your option is just saying per 1000 compare kar lo. Compare it per 1000. That's not really going to make a difference. You compare them per 100, per 1000. Ultimately, you're going to get a fractional number that will give you a clear picture. That okay, out of the total civilians, out of per 1000 civilians, these many civilians died. Out of per 1000 soldiers, these many soldiers died. And then we'll be able to clearly see that out of per 1000 soldiers, many more soldiers died as compared to per 1000 civilians. You get it? All right. Hope this is clear now. Okay, so this was your first question of logical flaw. Okay, in such questions, you do not have to conclude. Hello? Hello? Okay, okay, okay. Got it, got it, got it. Got it. Right. So, from where did you not hear me? I'm just repeating what you have to do in this question. Right, right, right. So I was on my slideshow wala screen. That's why I couldn't see your messages. Right. Uh, okay. So what I was telling you was that in this question, this is a slightly different question. Here, you have to basically identify the best argument out of these, the most logical argument out of these. So another way of writing this, so the examiner could have said, which is the most logical argument out of the following. Instead of writing that, the examiner has written that which of the arguments is least likely to have a logical fallacy, That is the only difference. Just identify the most logical argument out here that will appeal the most to the CEO, right? Okay. So yes, this is it. That is the only difference here, that instead of identifying a flaw within the argument, you have to just identify the most logical argument here. Okay, that's it. So let's see. So I was on the slideshow screen and I was in my flow. So I didn't even switch the screens for a while. Okay. All right. Now it's fine. Now it's fine, I hope. Okay. All right. So see. So with that, you have to see where is it that you are committing mistakes, as in is it a particular area, okay, or is it spread across areas? If let's say it's more of vocabulary, then of course you identified the problem and you know how to resolve it. Yes. If it's more of RC passages, then practice the more difficult question types of RC passages, because those must be the ones that may be posing a challenge for you, right? So Okay. The question is this, that is written on your screens, Bhushan. So quite a few of you are saying C for this. I've got one D also. All right. So internal studies conducted across groups and locations showed that openness increases innovation. This is the most logical out of the lot. Absolutely correct. So easy question, right? Even though it's a ZAT previous year question, it's an easy question, right? And here we can clearly see that this is very logically sound. Okay, just because something has been designed by a leading consultant, that does not make it necessary, that does not make it required, right? That does not even make it good. Then one of the participants, unless let's say there were just two employees, right, there were just two participants, this is actually low. D, we have only two options, we can either trade or suffer the consequences. This is such a subjective vague statement. What are going to be the consequences? Okay, then this is emotional. If you really care about the organization, you should approve this trade. This is an emotional way of uh, saying something, right? Logical fallacy is just another word for flaw only. Okay, so here instead of asking you which of the following is the most logical argument, the examiner phrased it in a different way. The examiner just said which of the following is least likely to have a logical flaw. So the fallacy is something that is flawed, something that is false. Okay, this can also be called logical fallacy. Okay, what is the logical fallacy in the given argument? Right? So nothing different as such, just another way of asking a question, right? That's why I did this. Okay, logical completion. We have seen such questions in your previous year papers, in MAH CET previous year papers, right? So here what happens is an argument is given to you, but it's not a complete argument. You have to complete it. Basically, these one out of these sentences is going to complete it. So what you have to do, you just have to read the previous part carefully and understand the various cause effect relationships given there, right? So when I say people buy prestige when they buy a premium product. So understanding this is very important. They want to be associated with something special. Mass marketing techniques and price reduction strategies should not be used. It's now when you read it, it's intuitively clear to you why they should not be used. The previous sentences are answering that, right? So you just have to look for something that is in line with your previous sentences. That's it. So this is again a very easy question type. Tell me, the previous sentences contain the answer. Okay, I've got one answer here. iPhone, okay. As an example, you are stating it, okay. C, okay. All right. Others? Everyone is saying C. No, no other option. Yes, no other option. Why not this aura of exclusivity wala option? Yes. Why not this? Why C? Yes. Tell me. Why not the aura of exclusivity, the option B? Why is that not the answer, in your opinion? Let's see what you say. Because see, here the reasoning process is very important. When you eliminate something, your reasons for eliminating it should also be clear to you and they should also be correct, right? So tell me, why is it that you've eliminated B? Yes. Okay. All right. That would be mass. How would that be mass? Achha, some of you are saying B now. All right. Some of you have changed your stance. No, but those who mark C, they can always give reasons for B, and those who mark B, they can always tell me about C. Yes. Tell me. So C says they are concerned with both the price also and they are concerned with the quality also, right? So if they are concerned about the price, then in that case, reducing the price will appeal them, isn't it? Tell me. Hmm. So the answer here is not going to be C. Okay. B is the answer. See, B is similar to iPhone. Now, Abhijit, and you presented iPhone as an example when we did this. Maintaining an aura of exclusivity. See, of exclusivity. Maintaining an aura is vague, I agree, but exclusivity, basically, you have to create that image that this product is an exclusive product. This is not meant for the masses, right? If you answer C here, that would mean that fine, the customer cares about quality, so the customer wants good quality, but at the same time the customer is price sensitive also, so the customer would want not a higher price, of course, demand that the customer is not going to want a very high price. That is what C would mean. Whereas the we are saying that mass marketing techniques and price reduction strategies should not be used. In case the customer is concerned about the price also, the customer will appreciate if you reduce prices. So C goes against what this last sentence itself says, right? That they should not be used. It is B. You should not use these mass marketing techniques, because if the customer gets the impression that you are marketing to the masses, then he or she will no longer perceive it as something exclusive, something premium, and would not buy it, right? So B, Bangalore is the answer, not C. Okay. So this is in GMAT easy level question. Okay. So I have framed it on the lines of that. Absolutely. Why not A? Let's look at that. Affluent purchasers currently represent a shrinking portion. So if they are a shrinking portion of the population of all purchasers, how does that give a reason as to why we should not use mass marketing and price reduction strategies? Yes. So you are saying that because they are a shrinking portion, that is why we should not use mass marketing techniques. Basically, you have to give me a demerit of using these two strategies, these two techniques, or a merit of not using them. That is what you have to do in the reason. A is doing neither. A is not affecting the argument at all. A is not affecting this relationship at all. Right? So, no, A cannot be the answer. All right, E. Let's look at E. Manufacturing a premium brand is not necessarily more costly than manufacturing a standard brand of the same product. This talks about costs, whereas I am talking about pricing and marketing. I am talking about pricing and marketing. How do you give cost as a reason for using a particular pricing and marketing strategy? And that too, when you relate it to the previous one, if you relate it to the previous sentence, it's more about what the customer considers to be prestigious, premium, something special. So this does not relate to it at all. Okay, again, it's going in a different direction. Cost ka discussion, right? Expansion of the market niche to include a broader spectrum of consumers will increase profits. If that is the case, then again, will I advise the company to not use it? I'll not advise the company then to not use it, right? So D again is inconsistent with not be used. So I hope this makes sense, that how B is the better answer as compared to C. All right, all right. Hope this makes sense now. Okay. We will have a whole session on parajumbles. Please be patient, okay? There I'll talk to you about parajumbles in detail, right? Right now, let's talk about critical reasoning. I hope, although we are encountering some difficulties in critical reasoning, but that's how critical reasoning is. It does demand a lot from you, right? So let's see some more question types. Here is a method of reasoning question type. So this demands a careful reading of the stimulus, okay, and basically looking at the underlying skeleton. What do I mean by that? Okay, so what is the role of this sentence? Let's say I analyze this sentence and I say, oh, this is a general assertion, this is a general sentence, right? This is probably the conclusion, this is probably the premise. So what am I doing? I am looking at the function that this sentence is playing. Okay, general statement, not doing anything. Oh, this is a premise, no, this is a conclusion. So in such questions where you have to identify the method of reasoning, the very first thing that you should know is, okay, what is the conclusion that the author is arriving at? What are the reasons of the author? How is the author going from the premise to the conclusion? What is the reasoning? How is he jumping from the premise to the conclusion? With the help of some data, with the help of just some core beliefs? How? This how is the method of reasoning, right? So read this, and I think the options here will actually give you an idea. They will give you an idea that what the method of reasoning of this argument is, right? So first you tell me the answer, then I'll tell you how to identify, how to basically dissect this. Yes, let's see. It's just the easy questions will. The easy questions, okay, not the difficult ones, right? Because I mean, if you look at your previous memory based papers, that's all that we have. They have not asked very difficult critical reasoning questions, right? E, D, all right. E, okay. Others, all right. Okay. E, D, okay. Basically, we are stuck between E and D, yes? And I've got some A's also, a couple of A's also. All right. Let's discuss this. So just a second, going to my slide. Yes, so here let's analyze. Social roles may either conflict or cooperate within any given person depending upon the circumstances. Looks like a general statement. They conflict when the behavior patterns demanded by one role cannot be performed while performing the second role. So that's when they conflict. Okay. Thus, one cannot easily be a saintly rake. Now, although this says thus, this is not the conclusion. What comes after this is not a conclusion. Thus, one cannot be a saintly playboy. That's what this means. Or a feminine brute. Here, feminine has been associated with, let's say, uh, grace, kindness, etc. Okay, brute is somebody who is, very crude and demonly and cruel, right? So one cannot be a saintly rake or a feminine brute, but given an understanding husband, a woman can be both a loving wife and a loving mother with no conflict between the roles, right? So if you see these, from this sentence to this sentence, these are all examples. These are all examples. Yes. Don't you think that these examples are just elucidating, are just clarifying what has been stated in the previous sentences? Yes. So first I made these general comments, right? First I made these general comments that they may either conflict or cooperate. They conflict when the behavior patterns demanded by one role cannot be performed while performing the second role. So that's why the author first gives an example of conflict, right? Now, then the author talks about the circumstances, that if the circumstances are fine, no, if the circumstances are favorable, then we can actually perform two roles together. They can cooperate also. So we are just clarifying what we stated in general terms in the earlier statements. So the method of reasoning employed here is the structure. If you look at the skeleton, when you write an article, first you form a skeleton of that article, no, a structure of that article in your mind. Okay, I'll go for a problem solution approach. I'll go for a general to specific approach, right? I'll go for let's say a compare and contrast approach. So what are these? These are methods of the way you will reason, you will provide your argument. So this is this sort of a method of reasoning. Here, the author is presenting specific examples to clarify a generality. Those who said B, absolutely correct. E says using paradox to highlight an implicit contradiction. Okay, what is a paradox? First of all, something that is logically contradictory. Paradox is a logical contradiction, right? So using paradox to highlight an implicit contradiction. But don't you think, first of all, even if you look at this as a paradox, let's say saintly rake or a feminine brute, if you have marked E by thinking of this, then the author doesn't just talk about this contradiction. The author also resolves this. The author also talks about cooperating. Those, when we talk about the second example here, we also talk about how social roles may cooperate also. So don't you think that even if you mark this, this is incomplete in nature? This is incomplete in nature. And the contradiction is not is implicit only in those two examples, saintly rake and feminine brood. It is not implicit in the loving mother and loving wife role. Right? So that's why not E. Okay. Coming to, I think A also somebody said, applying an individual attribute to a whole. We are not going from specific to general. We are not saying that because, let's say, a woman can be a loving mother also and she can be a loving wife also. That is why it is possible for a person to perform two roles. That's why a person's social roles can cooperate with each other. That's not the line of reasoning. We are not going from specific to general. So that's why A is not the answer. We are rather going from general and then giving specific examples of it. That's why B. Okay. Hope this is clear. All right. Controversy. Controversy is a dispute. Contradiction is a better term, Bhushan. Contradiction, okay, discrepancy, contrast. These are better terms. No, Nandraj, that's not at all the case. We do consider examples. A lot of arguments, they rest on examples, right? So, for example, if I just to make a very simple argument, if I say that Om has, let's say, Om has one nose, Nandraj has one nose, Bhushan has one nose, Nikita has one nose. They are all human beings. Therefore, probably human beings have one nose. You get it? This is an argument only, and this argument completely rests on examples, right? Now, coming to paradox. Yes, let's have a look at what a paradox is. Okay, it has generated quite the buzz. A paradox is simply a logical contradiction. When two scenarios that coexist, okay, they appear to be logically contradictory in nature, that's a paradox. We have a lot of paradoxes in science, in economics, right? In the business world also. So, for instance, a very easy paradox, the water diamond paradox. The water diamond paradox. Water is so essential to our lives, right? Yet it is cheaper than diamonds. Whereas diamonds are not at all essential, they are just ornamental. yet they are more expensive, much more expensive than water. So this is the water diamond paradox. It appears to be logically contradictory, no? That something so essential is so cheap while something so inessential is so expensive, right? So this is a logical contradiction. Now, a lot of paradoxes have underlying explanations for them. They appear to be logically contradictory, but they do carry explanations underneath. So, what is the explanation? Yes, so the questions that we are doing, okay, these question types can be asked in, your CET. In fact, contrast, discrepancy, paradox questions have been asked in your memory-based papers, right? You can find them. All right. So, whatever we are doing in critical reasoning, of course, these question types, this level of difficulty, these can come in your exam. Okay. Yes, war is peace. That is logically contradictory, right? Good, Parker. So, okay, somebody has given the answer also here. So, my question here is that here also there is something that appears to be contradictory here. There is a contrast here. It's not that the examiner will always use the word paradox. The examiner can use contradiction, contrast, discrepancy also. So you have to try to explain it. You have to try to explain it. But before you attempt the question, what is the explanation for this water diamond paradox? Does this exist? Very easy. Water is available in much more quantity as compared to diamonds. That is why. Right? So that's the underlying explanation that allows this situation to coexist. So you also have to find such an underlying explanation that allows this to happen. Right? So tell me what the answer should be. Yes. Sources for practicing these? Yes, there are quite a few sources. There's this source called 1000 CR Questions. It's actually a book by Kaplan, but you need not buy the book as such because a lot of forums discuss the answers to these questions on the internet. So you will find them on these forums, right? So that could be one source. And GMAT easy level CR questions, that could be another. But you actually need not go to the GMAT level. Even this will suffice for CET. Okay. So I've got E, D, B, A. This C is left. E and B, all right. Okay. So basically you seem to be divided between B and E. Others also? Yes. Are you there? Okay. So B says the more slowly water moves, the more conducive its temperature to the growth of algae. So in that case, this was very slow moving river water. This was very slow moving river water. Conducive means suitable for the growth of algae. Then algae should have grown. Then algae should have grown. Yes, in large numbers, algae should have thrived, in fact. But that didn't happen. The algae levels are low. So this does not explain. Okay. E says, except during periods of extreme drought. Okay, so we are talking about other periods. Algae levels tend to be higher in rivers in which the flow has been controlled by damming than in rivers that flow freely. How does this explain this contradiction, this contrast? We have to explain why something very anomalous, very unusual happened after a period of extreme drought. So how does this explain anything? This is talking about other occasions, not even about periods of extreme drought. B and E are not the answers. I've got A also. Okay, good. Let's look at it. During periods of extreme drought, the populations of some of the species that feed on algae tend to fall. So if that is the case, then algae population should increase. Algae population should increase because these species feed on algae. Their population has fallen. So algae population should increase. But that is not happening. The algae population is very low. So even A is not the answer. Okay. Between C and D. Yes. What should be the answer? Tell me. Between C and D. Okay, let me see who said D. Shashank said D. D is the answer. Good. Tehrish said D. Praful said D. Okay. Then, all right. So, yeah. No. Look at this. Okay, what has happened? Are you guys tired a little? देखो problem क्या है? What is the problem? Following a period of extreme drought, algae levels are low even in very slow moving river water, which should not have happened. This should not have happened. Why? Why it should not have happened? Because algae grow best in slow moving water. Okay, and the amount of algae per unit of water generally increases when there has been little rain. Right? So that is why it's contradictory. So you have to find that what is it that must have happened, what different must have happened during the drought that now the algae is not growing even in very slow moving river water. That means something must have happened during the drought that must have been it must have been counterproductive to the growth of algae, right? So A says that the population of the species that feed on algae fall. If the population of those things that are feeding on algae is falling, then algae population will increase. So definitely this is not the answer. B, the more slowly water moves, the more suitable its temperature is to the growth of algae. So in that case again, they should have thrived. C, when algae populations reach very high levels, okay, conditions within the river can become toxic or some of the other species that for some of the other species that normally live there. So C also looks like a very promising option because I'm saying the conditions in the river became toxic. But for whom? Not for the algae, for some of the other species. The other species that normally live there, not for algae. So who will die? The other species, not algae. Even this is not the answer. D is the answer here. Australian rivers dry up completely for short intervals in periods of extreme drought. Algae need water. Even though they need slow moving water, they need water. So if the river dried up completely, then a lot of algae must have died. You get it? So D is the answer here. That explains this. That why is it that the growth of algae is so low? I hope this makes sense to you. Absolutely correct, Sarish. Good. All right. Hope this makes sense. So these are, as I said, these are advanced question types. Okay. And these advanced question types, they are, of course, they require you to think a little more, right? Because while our mind very automatically gravitates towards deriving conclusions, towards attacking arguments, towards even adding something to the arguments, these are the things that take some effort, right? Analyzing what must have been the underlying structure, the underlying skeleton, right? This takes some effort. So now let's have a look at this question. Okay, it's a very interesting. Read it just like a paragraph. Just think that you do not have to do anything after this. We'll do this together, right? So it's a very, very interesting argument, right? And you will find that you are able to establish the way you are able to, understand it also pretty easily. Okay. So Ellen Fain and Sherry Schneider asked, so this is from a newspaper actually. These two people asked, whatever happened to working for a living and marrying for love? They are basically questioning what happened to it? Why do we not see it anymore? that people work for a living and marry for love. Why do we not see it much more? Why do we not see it anymore? In fact, that's what they want to see. We see it very less these days. People get married for many reasons. Now the author begins. Okay, so this was the question asked by these two people. The author says, people get married for many reasons. Marriage is a social and moral contract, a matter of practicality, convenience, and self-interest. So now see, the author gives a lot more reasons to get married apart from love. Practicality, convenience, self-interest. There are those who love and never get married. There are also people who love and never get married. And there are those who marry without love and have a lasting and functional marriage. So that is also possible. If you marry without love, it does not mean you will not later come to love the person you marry. So the author is presenting a number of possibilities before us, that it's possible to marry for other reasons, right? And even if you marry without love, then also the marriage can last, right? And it's possible that you come to later love the person you marry. That's what the author is saying. And if you marry the person you love, it does not mean that you will always love that person or have a successful marriage. So loving the person is not a guarantee of a successful marriage. The divorce rate is very low in many countries. So to substantiate what the author is saying, to support it, the author is saying, see, the divorce rate is very low in many countries that have pre-arranged marriage, right? Whereas the divorce rate is very high in countries where people that base their marriage decisions on love. So this is the argument that has been given to you. Okay, the author gives a number of reasons to marry, and the author then talks about what all happens when people marry without love. Okay, and the author says that even when people marry without love, they can have a lasting and functional marriage. Then to support this, the author says, see, the divorce rate is low. Let me say this. In pre-arranged marriages, in countries that have pre-arranged marriages, the divorce rate is low. So you see how he has related to marrying without love, how he has related marrying without love to a lasting marriage. Similarly, with love, if you marry out of love, that may not imply a successful marriage, may not be successful. So love marriage, divorce rate high, divorce rate high. So now we have identified the underlying structure of the author's argument here, right? We have to now tell why, which of the following arguments gives a similar reasoning as the argument above. इसका reasoning जो है ना, जैसे हमने अभी इसका reasoning identify किया है, whose reasoning is similar to this reasoning. That's it. A says there are various reasons for a couple to adopt a child. Some of them are selfish, others are not. Okay. If the reasons are selfish, it will eventually harm them. If they are not selfish, then they will be happy. All right. In countries where couples adopted out of selfless reasons, they reported higher happiness. Okay. Whereas in countries where this was not the case, there was a higher number of domestic disputes in the adoptive families. Right. You see that something is wrong here. We talk about happy. Okay. Here we are talking about happiness. If they are not selfish, then they will be happy. Okay. Whereas if the reasons are selfish, it will eventually harm them. So here, when I said without love, a lasting successful marriage. With love, again, my consequences, this said successful marriage, this said not successful marriage. Whereas if this says happy, then this should have said not happy. This should have said not happy, right? But this starts talking about domestic disputes. How do I know that that means not happy? Seems to be problematic. One variable does not match. We get it, we don't get it. I need active participation from you. Right? Without love, successful marriage. With love, not a successful marriage. So, selfish, not happy, not selfish, happy. That is how it should have been structured. But we suddenly introduced extra things like domestic disputes, etc. So, no, this is not similar. This is not similar. Let's have a look at B. Yes, it does not follow similar reasoning. Let's have a look at B. There are multiple reasons to be financially dependent, but there is practically none to not be independent. That means the author here, just like here the author gives multiple reasons, just like here the author gives multiple reasons, those are being given here. Those are also being given here, multiple reasons. But does the author name them? Are the names of those multiple reasons given to us? Okay, not given. Chalo, then also let me just proceed. Let me just consider this. Let me read further. There is practically no reason to not be independent. Yes. So isn't this contradictory? Yes, tell me this. There are multiple reasons to be financially dependent, but there is practically no reason to not be independent. Doesn't that mean there is no reason to be dependent? There is no reason to be dependent. So isn't the statement itself contradictory? Here I am saying multiple reasons to be dependent, but no reason to be dependent. What? What does this even mean? So this is inconsistent in itself and of course does not match the structure of my argument. Okay. All right. Last question for the day then. Last question for the day. Don't worry. Just be with me for two more options. Okay, for two more options. That is it. I'm just trying to show you that if you get such lengthy questions, lengthy analogy questions, right, then how to look at them. Just break them into smaller parts and you will be sorted. Break them into smaller parts and you will be sorted. Just like, see, I broke it down into arrows now. So what did I do? I just reduced it to symbols. Marry, love marriage, successful. Okay, marry out of love, successful. Arranged marriage, sorry, love marriage not successful, arranged marriage successful. That's what the author said, right? So consequence not successful, successful. So here also the consequence should have been happy, not happy. But the consequence given here was domestic disputes and everything. So not happy to pata nahi kahan chala gaya, right? Not happy is not given. So that's why A was not the answer. Here this did not make sense at all. The first statement did not make sense at all. Eliminated. See, there is only one reason for, see, only one reason. Whereas I am acknowledging multiple reasons. So does not match the structure. Right in the first sentence. Right. Even this is not similar. So you just have to, just be a little alert. Just be a little alert. Now look at D. Look at D here. There are various reasons to procreate, basically to have children of your own, right, to reproduce. Now see, reasons are also given. Okay, so far perfect. So far perfect. Author's argument also began like this. Reasons, multiple reasons. Okay, and looking for supportage may not be the only one. Just like that, the author was trying to say love may not be the only one. Okay, makes sense. Even if, oh, so there were ifs here also. Let's see. Even if people procreate for this reason, they may not later look for support from their child. Even if, so people had child for old age support. Let's say initially they had a child for old age support, but later on may not look for support. So even if this happened because of this. Okay. And people who do not actually reproduce for support, these people did not originally have a child for old age support. But they may later come to expect it. They may expect it later on. So you see, exactly the opposites of each other. The consequences are just like successful, not successful. Successful and not successful. Where did I write this? Yes. Okay. Then there also it was marrying out of love and not marrying out of love. Here also initially sought old age support. Now initially did not seek old age support. Okay, pretty parallel. Now, see, it was found that in countries where majority of the children were supporting their parents, the parents had actually procreated for reasons other than this support. So, just like the examples of these countries were given, divorce rates. Just a second. Yeah. divorce rates. Exactly similar examples have been given of various countries here as well, right? So when parents had actually did not have expectations, the children came to support them, majority came to support them, and when children had these expectations, majority did not come to support them. So this follows the exact pattern, right? So that's why D is the answer here. There's an E option also, but in this case, for this question, because it was such a lengthy question, I framed D as none of the above. Okay, so D, however, matches the pattern. So it's all about just matching the pattern, analogy question. Okay. So I know that this is a little challenging for you in terms of, let's say, comprehending, right? Or in terms of forming a sequence. But if you do that with a cool mind, trust me, these are not difficult questions. Okay. Anything that is not clear, please ask. Anything that is not clear to you. Logical completion was easy. See, all of you, I think, understood logical completion. Then logical flaw also. You identified the second question of logical fallacy. All of you, I think, gave they gave the same answer for that. Any other question in which you have a query? Crux of the paradox was what is usually likely to follow may not be true. No. Crux is simply a sort of a main idea. It's a main idea sort of a question. What is the main idea of the argument? Nothing different from, let's say, what you've been doing in, let's say, your para summary questions or even your main idea of the passage questions. It's not very different from that. Right? So, hope this makes sense to you. And you can just re-watch some of these questions, okay? Those that were not clear to you later on. If you still have a query, you can comment in the comment section, okay? I'll discuss. All right. So you know this, right? You know all of this. I need not repeat. This is important. We can stay connected like this and this and this. All right. It was lengthy. It was lengthy. Reading, Bhushan. So here for you, the solution is reading. Why? Because that means the kind of vocabulary that you're weak in can be found while reading, right? Contextual vocabulary is what you need to build. So this is what is going to help you. And of course, whatever words you don't understand, find out their meanings, right? Quiz, yes. We had a quiz yesterday itself. All right. So Sanil, I understand your query, but again, first do one thing: pick up your previous year papers, your memory-based papers, and see how many of them you're not able to solve. Your paper level of CR is pretty easy. Okay, so you need not even worry about solving it in the given time constraint. You will be able to. If there are some questions, then there are always going to be 1 to 2 such questions, right? Which will demand more of your time. Then you have to compensate that time with the other questions. There are, of course, going to be time saving questions also, like cause effect is a short question type, right? So you need not worry about it given the level of CR that is asked in MAHCET. All right, I always try to cover something that is a notch higher, something that is more difficult. Welcome. See you tomorrow. Bye. Take care. You too, Om. Bye.